Hello, my name is Sen Hastings, and this is my talk, Why Open Matters, the Cost of Transparency in 2023. So first we have a little bit of a disclaimer. Warning, this talk contains, oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong disclaimer. Here we go. The views and opinions expressed in the following presentation are my own, and any resemblance to those held by past, current, future, or alternate timeline versions of my employers, affiliated institutions, spouses, or roommates is entirely coincidental. That's to say, I'm not here at the behest of anybody. This is just my words. I'm not selling anything. These are my opinions. So, to get started, this is a talk about open source hardware. Now, I'm saying this because I want to say what this is not a talk about. And this is not a talk about data centers. And this is not a talk about the cloud. I'm sorry. Actually, this is not a talk about open source hardware. Because open source hardware, like in the home for general consumers, doesn't really exist, unfortunately. And I mean, I love little like open source like dev boards. Like, so Crowd Supply is basically like open source Kickstarter, and Tindy is like open source Etsy. But it's for like hobbyists and tinkerers like myself. It's like little electronic dev boards and stuff like that. What I mean is, you can't go to a big box store and get like a microwave or a dishwasher that's got like an open source hardware logo on it. What I mean to say is, this is a talk about stuff that normal people would buy and interact with. And I'm only going to talk about three things. But I believe those three things deliver a good cross-section of the problem at hand. So like when I talk about a TV, I could just as easily be talking about microwave ovens or electric cars or IoT soap dispensers. Yes, that is a real thing. Or toasters or smart fridges even. So keep that in mind. This covers really anything that has a computer in it, which is everything in 2023. And this is a talk about why perhaps, maybe, those things should be a little bit more open. So without further ado, let's talk about smart TVs. Specifically, let's talk about the LG 50-inch class Cinema 3D 1080p 120 Hz LED TV with Google TV, 49.5 inches diagonal. It was first announced Christmas Eve of 2012 for the 2013 model year. It shipped with Android Honeycomb, but later got an update to Jelly Bean in late 2013. And on Christmas of 2016, one of them got infected with ransomware. So the story is actually, so Darren called LG customer service and was quoted $340 for a service technician to come out and factory reset the device, which, if anybody knows, on an Android phone, you can factory reset it by like holding down a couple buttons when you turn it on. So that's a little like, after a couple days and a few thousand retweets, LG quietly DM'd him instructions to factory reset the device. So that's a little funky from LG, but you know, it's reset now, so you just like update the software or whatever, and it was discontinued in 2015. Which kind of sucks, because it's been out for like 2 years, and people don't buy a new TV every year or even every 2 years. Like in early 2017, this TV is only 4 years into its, like 6 to 7 year lifespan. And also, by early 2017, you have to think that the Android version that this is running represents less than 6%, so that's Jelly Bean 4.2 series, of all devices on the Google Play Store. And when 86% of all devices checking into Google Play are running an Android version, aka an API version, because they break API versions, if it's running a newer version, people aren't going to be writing apps for it. So it kind of sucks that they're not like keeping software up to date on something that's supposed to have a 6 to 7 year lifespan. But here's the thing. I lied. Kind of. Because remember, it doesn't actually run Android. It runs something called Google TV. And to understand what Google TV is, we're in early 2017 now, we have to go all the way back to 2010. Google TV is not the same as Android. So back in 2010, Google TV is announced at Google I/O as a joint venture between Google and some hardware OEMs like Intel, Sony, Logitech, and a few others, along with some cable companies. It's not Android. The press release literally says Google TV is based on the Android platform and runs the Google Chrome web browser. So the idea is that it's either like baked into the TV, the technology is baked into the TV, like a smart TV, or it's a box that sits between your television and your cable provider. So it can produce its own content, but it can also pass through content from your cable box. You can control everything with like a keyboard interface. So it was your sort of standard smart connected appliance thing. It could run Android apps. It also had a full Chrome web browser. So the idea being is that if you want to pull something up on YouTube, you literally pull up a web browser to youtube.com or any other streaming service if the streaming service doesn't have an app, using Flash, because this is 2010. So it's less like pure Android and it's more like Google Chrome plus television is a good way to think about it. It had some issues. Things kind of got off to a rocky start, so there were some software issues, and Google asked their hardware partners to delay launch. When things finally did launch, they weren't super well received. So Logitech was one of the first, or perhaps the first, hardware device available running Google TV. Things were kind of bad. Like, so bad they lost $100 million, fired a CEO, slashed the prices from $300 to $100, and left the market completely. They still make nice keyboards, though. Other hardware companies also had products that seemed to be let down by the current state of software, unfortunately. Nevertheless, Google pressed onward and came out with a new software version, Google TV 2.0. So TechCrunch was not super sympathetic in their first review. They were a little bit more generous in their second review, but they were kind of let down by a lack of content. So Hulu, the Hulu website was blocked. Hulu blocked their services on the Google TV platform. Continuing to be optimistic, Google chairman Eric Schmidt claimed that most TVs would have Google TV pre-installed by like summer of 2012. And remember that around this time, Apple had already come out with their second generation Apple TV, and Roku had been around for like 3 or 4 years at this point, since like 2008. So finally, we're coming back around again. It's late 2012. LG is announcing their second generation of Google TV devices running Google TV 2.0. And there's our boy from the GA6400 series. Rumors had already started swirling that Google was going to pivot, but not to Google TV 3.0, maybe to something else called like Android TV. That was announced at Google I/O 2014. And oh yeah, the Chromecast had been available now for like a year, and the Chromecast only cost $35 as opposed to paying $100 for a box or $1,600 for a smart TV. So it should come as no surprise to anyone that in early January of 2015, So this article from The Verge, and basically every other article talking about this, points to this one Google Plus post on the Google TV developers group. To my knowledge, there was no other public announcement, no press release. They didn't mention it at Google I/O 2014. I can't show you a screen cap of this because, and if you try to use the Wayback Machine to look at an archive copy, it looks like this. I mean, like seriously, it's like a white page. But here's the thing, if you open up the web inspector, there's like stuff here. It's just like not rendering properly. So if you scrape the HTML, you will actually find the post and all of the comments underneath it. So here's the announcement. So to summarize this, Android TV is fully launched. We are no longer developing Google TV software. Some of the old hardware will get updated to Android TV, but most of it won't. New Android TV hardware is coming out. LG and Logitech are not mentioned. And the last one, and this is really important, this is the last paragraph. Thank you for being passionate developers creating great content and apps for the living room. With this shift, we encourage you to transition your living room development efforts to Android TV apps and cast-enabled apps. While the Google TV libraries will no longer be available, we've made it really easy to transition apps to Android TV using familiar Android development tools as well as our new lean-back support libraries. Google TV is not Android. It had its own SDK. Google took it down. So this is not a like, oh, you shouldn't write new apps for it because like they're not going to be supported. This is like, no, like lock the doors, turn off the lights, like we're closed. Like you cannot write new apps for Google TV now. So Google killed it. Kind of. I mean, LG, the writing was already kind of on the wall. Like, you know, the tone of these is not like nobody's surprised. It's like, oh, it's officially, oh, it's, you know, it's finally happening. It's this like long, drawn out thing. And, you know, we can kind of do a little bit of a postmortem on this by going through some of the comments underneath that initial post on the Google Plus page. So this is looking really familiar. Somebody's asking about their LG Google TV running Jelly Bean and be like, hey, you know, could we at least get an update to basically turn it into like a Chromecast? Oh, apparently that was promised 2 years ago. And then I think personally this is the best. There's literally like 70 comments. I think this is the best one. It was obvious that Google Plus TV users, me included, were going to get dumped. But why don't Google try to push manufacturers to at least give the community a way to hack the systems and try to update the devices by themselves, as is, without any warranty and conditions? We need unlock devices and bootloader keys to be able to do this. So the LG TV we're talking about was actually ARM-based. But remember, Intel was a hardware partner initially. The Logitech Review, which is the box that Logitech came out with, that was Intel-based. A lot of the early TVs were Intel-based. But no, they all had locked bootloaders. So what you're left with now is a TV that literally takes a solid minute to boot. And you have to plug a Roku into it if you want it to like function. Or, you know, it's just another statistic. So on a slightly lighter note, let's talk about something a bit more friendly. Let's talk about ice cream. Because not everything has a commercial lifespan of 7 years. Some products, especially commercial ones, can have a lifespan much longer. So here we're going to take a look at the Taylor model number C602 heat treatment combination shake and soft serve freezer. Introduced sometime in April of 2004, this machine is a semi-automatic, fully computerized, self-pasteurizing shake and soft serve freezer. It is essentially 2 machines in one. It supports up to 4 flavors of fully automatic shake goodness by 4 different syrups that are mixed into the neutral soft serve being dispensed. And a single flavor of soft serve dispensed via a manual draw handle. And thanks to its self-heating or pasteurizing feature, the ice cream and shake mix in the machine is heated up and sterilized daily. So you only actually have to break it apart and clean it with a brush every 2 weeks. No wonder then this machine is available exclusively to McDonald's? Why is that? Well, if the sell sheet is to be believed, it has something to do with the fact that like the self-heating feature like reduces cleaning and maintenance, which is pretty funny to anybody who's ever tried to buy ice cream from McDonald's because they break. Like all the time. Apparently they require frequent service visits from authorized Taylor repair persons too, which costs money if you're a franchisee on top of the fact that you're not selling ice cream. What's super weird about this is that Taylor makes all sorts of commercial appliances and ice cream machines for a bunch of other like fast food restaurants, not just McDonald's. And you know, like you don't have an issue getting like a Frosty from Wendy's, so like why is this a problem with this machine at McDonald's? Well, somebody else was asking that question too. Enter Frobot. Frobot sounds like, and was, a startup trying to market frozen yogurt vending machines. So they were using a Taylor machine, and just like basically everybody else was, and they were sticking it in an enclosure with like a touchscreen and a credit card reader, some extra control electronics. And they started having issues. They were basically having to administer these things remotely, and they kept having problems. And so what they eventually developed was essentially data logging equipment that they could use to try and sort of sniff the error codes and kind of figure out what's going on. And after a while, they realized they could sort of develop this into its own product. And they actually started reaching out to McDonald's franchisees and created like a sort of a beta testing thing. So they rolled that into a new company called Kitsch. So they rolled out this whole trial with NDAs and all sorts of stuff like that. And that was going pretty well until one particular franchise owner James Gamble, who happened to apparently have a pretty cozy relationship with both Taylor and McDonald's corporate, apparently, supposedly leaked some info. So, important thing to realize is that up until about 2017, all McDonald's franchisees were required to have this specific machine. So the market for this, for a device to hook onto this machine is pretty big if you think about it. So currently Kitch has filed 2 lawsuits. The first is against Taylor, TFG, which is a Taylor subsidiary, and Tyler Gamble, the franchisee. And the second is against McDonald's corporate. So the premise of the first lawsuit is IP theft, and the premise of the second lawsuit is actually false advertising, but both lawsuits share some common ground. So the first lawsuit, it's a little corny, honestly. I mean, this is a case about corporate espionage and the extreme steps one manufacturer has taken to conceal and protect a multi-million-dollar repair racket. It's like borderline comic book, kind of. And they also reuse the same joke, this tweet from McDonald's corporate in both lawsuits. But the premise is, once again, Tyler Gamble, a franchisee, approached them to join the product trial, and during the course of said trial, fed confidential info to Taylor and Associates that was used to develop the TSSE, or Taylor Shake Connectivity Solution, which is a competing product. The second lawsuit concerns the outcome of that, where McDonald's, as part of an email newsletter, sent a message basically saying, hey, look, everybody, we're coming out with this new thing, the TSSC, it's going to be fantastic. And hey, by the way, we've heard about everybody is using this other thing called like the Kitch or whatever, and like that might void your warranty, and also we think it's like super dangerous, so you should we really think that you should stop using it. So Kitch claims this is false advertising, and the reason why a ton of their subscribers left, which tanked their business. Kitch, I think, has honestly some pretty good arguments here. But I think before we get too much further, we should talk about what the Kitch solution device, as it's called in the lawsuits, actually is. So here we can use this handy diagram from the Model C602 service manual. So the Kitch device, the basic concept is that the Kitch device sits here between the main control board, the UVC3 board, and the display/input unit, and acts as a man in the middle. It literally sniffs the bus. It sees the information being sent by the control board to the display and vice versa. And it can also actually impersonate the keypad and actually send keystrokes to the control board. Here's the device in situ. Yes, it is a Raspberry Pi with a couple of maybe specialized USB serial cables attached. We're not quite sure because it's all proprietary. So then, through the magic of the cloud and AI, you can view statistics about your machine. You can remotely control your machine, and you can receive reports if there's an issue, or you can even have the machine, I believe it's called Kitch Assist, correct itself. So sometimes the machine will throw codes for correctable errors. Like, let's say the product didn't get hot enough during the pasteurization cycle. A lot of the time, this will happen because the hoppers are just overfull. So you could have somebody stand near the machine and realize oh man, this thing isn't going to complete its 4-hour cycle because it didn't get hot enough. Well, the Kitch device is sitting there and it knows this is happening. So it's I'm just going to restart the heat cycle. Because if the machine gets worried about the product not being safe, it locks the machine out. You can't dispense a shake, you can't dispense ice cream, and you have to drain everything and clean the machine. It's game over. But the important thing to recognize here is that this does not replace any part inside of the machine. It adds kind of a layer of omniscient oversight, if you will. So it's an external device, it's an external force inflicting its will through existing interfaces. Kind of Fonzie and the jukebox, if you've ever watched Happy Days. The Kitch device is reliant on the existing infrastructure of the machine, which, because it's proprietary, could change at any time. Taylor could decide to change the design of the control board or do a new firmware update and the timing changes or whatever, and Kitch is dead in the water. There is an inherent danger of designing a peripheral for an ecosystem that has no explicit guarantee of consistency. What's even more strange is that in the language of the first lawsuit, Kitsch positions themselves as a competitor to Taylor. Now, while this is technically correct, it's a little bit off-putting because depending on how this progresses, what sort of precedent does that set? Does Kitsch want their own monopoly on AI IoT ice cream machines? If another ice cream machine OEM or aftermarket companies come up with different mechanisms for rendering the same functionality, can Kitsch go after them too? So fortunately, the judge in this case actually addresses this by limiting the scope of the temporary restraining order that they sought against the defendants. Literally says, the court will not adopt Kitsch's proposed order because it is overbroad and vague. For example, it would encompass imitating a firmware device or cloud platform, which in itself is not actionable unless misappropriated trade secrets were involved. It could also sweep in products independently developed or reverse engineered in a legal manner. It's very clear what Kitsch's motives are. They've mentioned that they've increased prices multiple times. You know, first it was a $0 activation fee, $10 a month, $250, $30, $250, $39, and they wanted to go up to $50 apparently. And you know, they lay out their four-step plan for world domination here. The last thing of which is they want to develop an entire operating system that they're going to license to equipment manufacturers. This is really funny actually, because in this Wired article, Kitsch's CEO talks about a time he was in correspondence with Taylor back in the Frobot days. They were actually friendly with each other. Taylor sent them some machines. And so he talks about this fact that they were actually trying to get a hold of Taylor to get some help reverse engineering the bus. And Taylor was like, look, we ain't going to stop you. We ain't going to help you either. And O'Sullivan, one of Kitsch's co-founders, took this as like, oh, okay, well, we can just do whatever we want. Kitsch is absolutely not chill in this regard. They are absolutely out for blood here. Kitsch also makes a bunch of other claims. They claim that, for instance, oh, this is the error code the machine displays. It's really cryptic and hard to understand, which sure it is until you look at the owner's manual where it tells you what the code is. Or there's this other claim here. O'Sullivan mentions a bunch of time in this article that basically they needed to access information about product temperatures inside of the machine for food safety purposes, and the only way to access that was by using the secret code, and the secret code isn't published in the manual. So their machine that they were using in the Frobot, which is either the C716 or the C717, I'm not sure which one it is. The only difference between them is a pump, basically. What he's talking about is either the heat cycle summary, which is basically the stats of the last 366 pasteurization cycles, or the product temperatures inside of the machine, which is called current conditions. So both of those statistics are available in the manager's menu, which has its own code, 8309, okay? And that is in the user interface section of the operator's manual. Now, to be fair to Mr. O'Sullivan, all of that information is also inside of the service menu, but only because the service menu contains everything inside of the manager's menu. Kitsch also says the firmware of the device has bugs because the machine appears to behave inconsistently, and the Kitsch solution device fixes these. So here in the lawsuit, they outline basically hey, here are all the bugs we found with the machine, with the ice cream machine, and here's how the Kitsch device fixes them. If the machine's auto function is disabled, it gets better. Oh, here's that feature I was talking about, Kitsch Assist, that auto-correcting feature. Kitsch notifies the user. Kitsch notifies the user. Kitsch has developed the ability to something. Here's another one. My favorite page is coming up next. It's page 27. So, oh, a little ahead of myself here. So, do we just take Kitsch's word here? Look, to be fair to Kitsch, there's a real problem here. Taylor is perhaps incompetent or perhaps trying to enforce a monopoly or something like that, but I really want to adopt the whole David versus Goliath type idea here, but the thing that we have to understand is that Kitsch is not impartial here. Okay? Kitsch wants to engineer a solution and wants to sell people that solution. And franchise owners should want a functioning ice cream machine, not an expensive ice cream machine that then requires another expensive subscription service to actually work. Okay. We can't trust Kitch to be impartial here. So, moving on, final thing I'm going to talk about is tractors. So, this is the John Deere 5105M. I think it was available starting sometime in one form or another since the early 2000s. And look, I think you know where I'm going with this. Here's a lawsuit from a farmer on the basis for which is that John Deere, the tractor company, has effectively created a repair monopoly by computerizing their tractors to the point where you need special diagnostic tools to figure out what's going on, making those tools available only to dealerships. Also you need to authorize new parts with the ECU that you have to use with one of the special tools. Oh, and also they've basically very, very highly incentivized their dealers to consolidate to the point where over 90% of dealerships are actually not like single location dealerships. So like if you're a farmer within a 200-mile radius of you, maybe there's 3 John Deere dealerships. Statistically, they're all owned by the same company. So much for choice. And actually, here's a second lawsuit from another farmer about basically the same thing. And actually, this is a third lawsuit, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. 9 separate class action lawsuits against John Deere from different farmers. Like, this is absolutely 100% a thing. But to talk more about that whole like parts being like paired to the device, I want to use an analogy that hits really close to home for me, and I think hits close to home for a lot of you. So I used to fix cell phones professionally. I did so for about two years. So you know how like sometimes when you break your phone screen, it like still works, like the top layer of glass is broken, but like you can still see what's going on and like you can still interact with it. Okay, so what if I told you that in a lot of cases, depending upon the structure of the screen, you can literally scrape off the top layer of broken glass and glue on a new piece of glass? Okay, so you can imagine this sort of cyclical economy whereby you're going to, take broken screens off of phones, put them in a box, ship them to a refurbisher, and then buy discounted refurbished screens from that refurbisher, sort of like a whole core charge arrangement. And actually, in 2016, this is kind of interesting, there was a blip in the market for iPhone 6 screens, okay? They doubled in price from overseas. But we were actually, and I'm sorry to do a callback to yesterday, there were actually some local to our city, some local Russian guys who had their own equipment to do glass replacement. And we were able to work out with them, and we were able to keep our prices down, okay? You can't do that anymore because iPhone screens and cameras and I think some other stuff they're paired to the device now. Like Apple's self-service repair program, okay? If you want parts from Apple, which you can only get parts that will work if you get them from Apple, you have to give them your serial number, and then when you do the repair, you have to call them up and they have to arrange the magic handshake with Apple's mothership so that the new screen can be accepted by the iPhone's motherboard. So now it's time to ask ourselves, what is the cost of transparency in 2023? So I don't know whoever looked at my abstract. I sort of posed some bullet points as like questions almost. They were answers. So the cost is security, not only in terms of like being able to update the device, because if you can't update the device because the bootloader is locked, but also in terms of like, am I going to be able to use this device for 5 or 6 or 7 years? Repairability. Again, if you're locked out, if there's serialization or stuff like that, and you're not necessarily able to fix something, it costs actual money to buy new stuff when you could just be able to fix the old stuff, which for the most part is built with off-the-shelf components. And it also costs us transparency. And what transparency really is it's fear. It's fear of the unknown. It's having this carved, solid block of obsidian at the center of your life that you can't address. And that sucks. So, like I said, I'm not selling anything. I don't really have a whole lot of solutions. There's something called Right to Repair, which is sort of a movement that's pushing forward in this regard. Louis Rossmann is a MacBook repair person, but was based in New York. He actually moved to Austin. And he's spent a lot of money legitimately on trying to lobby for this. There was actually a bill passed in New York State. It basically passed with flying colors. And it sat on the governor's desk for 4 months, and then it was entirely rewritten. They took out all the language that was like, you're going to give us parts, and they added language that was like, well, only if it doesn't violate IP, and like it may not necessarily be component parts, it may just be like larger components. So we're still in the position where like, oh, the USB port on your MacBook is dead. You don't need a new USB port, you need a whole new motherboard. That'll be $900, please. I wish there was a solution for this. This is a social issue, honestly, because, you know, back in the mid-1950s, you could get whole published books full of schematics, collected schematics for different radio sets from all sorts of different manufacturers. But the tone has shifted, the tone has changed, and I think we need to start, like, pulling it back a little more to center. So that's my talk. This is my contact. Oh, any questions?
Questions? So I have one. If you combine like your first and second points, right? So what if there was actually something dangerous about that TV in the first example, like the pasteurization or whatever in the thing, right? Then do you think there would be a, consumer, someone would care more? There would be regulation then because it was somehow dangerous in the consumer home versus, oh, it's a TV or something like that?
Maybe. What's so funny about the Kitsch device, and Kitsch actually argues this, is that, first of all, because McDonald's corporate argues basically like, oh, this is dangerous. It could cause the machine to operate when, because somebody is remotely controlling it while you're trying to work on the machine could just come alive and spew hot, ice cream all over you.
Yeah.
And
it
literally says in the service manual, like, unplug the machine before working on it. And also, like, when you open the door, there's interlocks. So, like, things get de-energized and it can't hurt you. So the whole idea that there's kind of any danger in the first place is a little bit bogus. I would hope so. Maybe.
Yeah. When I guess I was thinking about it in a potentially positive way, which is therefore those regulations could be used to kind of guide, if you will, the manufacturers and so on into better behavior. Rather than just the laziness.
It's hard because manufacturers, large organizations, they're essentially they're organisms, and when you scare something, when you scare an animal, like, it doesn't always necessarily behave how you would like it to behave. So I would hope so, but I don't know, unfortunately.
Other folks, yeah. Just a second, if you can just wait for the mic.
The microphone.
I think it's quite well known at this point that opening up, especially things like software, and the classic example is cryptography. If things are viewable, then they have fewer bugs, and people often won't trust them unless they're open. So if there was a case, I don't know whether there is a case of this. Say you had an ice cream machine and it had a bug in it, and the bug made it not do the pasteurization properly, and people got sick.
Oh yeah.
Then wouldn't you be able to argue that not opening this stuff up is in fact a public health hazard potentially, because the bugs like that would be more likely to be caught?
Yeah, you would think so. Again, what I find particularly egregious is the fact that it's like Kitsch claims this machine has issues, because they're always watching it. They're always seeing what it does. And they make claims that it's like, oh, the target temperatures drift overnight and blah, blah, whatever, stuff like that. And we've noticed that under these circumstances, the machine does this thing. And it's all redacted. It's all redacted, which is like, how is this? And so it's like, this isn't like making, like, Kitsch is not doing this out of the goods of their heart. Like, Kitsch is doing the American, find a problem and find a need and fill it. They found a problem and they're fixing it, but they want a monopoly on fixing it now, which is like not something that we necessarily do in the open software world, which is a little disappointing.
I see. Yeah. So they might be a lot more successful. Well, it'd be a lot better for the public if they made all this stuff public.
Yeah,
of course.
I mean, again, what the public really needs is a functioning ice cream machine, not a monopolized Band-Aid solution.
All right, let's take one more question, and if you want to come up and get connected. And one more question somewhere. Yep, over on the far side. Thank you.
I really thought that Kitsch were the good guys in solving the ice cream issue.
I thought so too. Like, I really was going to basically take the whole narrative that a lot of the news organizations were taking, but then I started reading their lawsuits, and it's so hard because it's just like in real life, everything's really muddy. But the best way that I can think of this is it's like a smaller snake fighting a bigger snake. Like, nobody's really 100% clean here. Yeah. Unfortunately, nobody has pure altruistic reasons for doing this stuff. Money is involved, unfortunately.
Yeah. So that wasn't quite my question, but it was more of a statement. But the question was, I think in the UK and worldwide historically with car manufacturers, they always went after the guys who built aftermarket parts. So anyone who's ever serviced a car knows you can buy different brands of oil filters, etc., etc. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. With that precedent set for the likes of the Deere tractor company, the Taylors of the world, would that not be a template to follow or a standard?
I would. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't want people modifying and souping up their vehicles like moonshiners back in the early aughts, early teens, because then you'd get NASCAR. That's where NASCAR came from. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's actually changing in the car world too. Like, especially you take a look at Tesla, and things are getting pretty locked down. Like, I don't know if you heard about Simone Yetch. She's a YouTuber. She converted her Tesla into sort of a pickup truck, and she was very, very afraid that she was going to get locked out of the supercharger network for doing that, which is very disappointing, honestly.
All right. Thank you, Sen.
Thank you.
All the great stories.